Hi everyone, my name's Grace Tran, and today I'm going to be talking about the rise in Asian American discrimination with the outbreak of COVID-19. So, with everything going on, especially with coronavirus increasing in America with its cases and everyone becoming more aware of its effects and things like that, a lot of Asian Americans are being discriminated more and more because they are just simply from Asian descent and are being given forms of slurs thrown at them or microaggressions given to them and all kinds of discrimination being treated with Asian Americans. Even though Asian American racism isn't as strong as maybe Black Americans or Hispanic Americans, it still persists and is still a problem in America today. And so with that, it's up to us as citizens to be aware of these microaggressions or these forms of discrimination that might be occurring, whether in our everyday lives, our everyday conversations, or even just when we go out and we see the news, and we have to educate ourselves and become more aware and more proactive against what these forms of discrimination are and how to fight against them. And it's not like any form of discrimination against Asians has been a new concept with coronavirus. It's been something that's been installed in America's history ever since America has been created. The biggest, by far most expansive form of discrimination against a Asian American would be the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, where there was actually a law passed that the Chinese weren't allowed to even enter or leave and come back to America. Even if they were a citizen, even if they did work here, they weren't allowed to come and enter unless they were a doctor or a form of needed profession. There's also times in World War II, like with the Japanese internment camps, where if you were just accused of being of Asian descent or of Japanese descent, you were sent to an internment camp, which is essentially a location where the government would lock up a lot of Asian Americans just because of everything going on with World War II. Even if they were born and raised in the United States, even if they were already citizens and had no contact or no influence on what was happening with the World War, they were still taken and locked up in a camp. There's many more forms of discrimination against Asians, especially during the Vietnam War, especially with the Korean War. There's a lot of microaggressions that have been built up to today, whether it's passed down through generations or through personal experience of going through those wars and things like that. Everything has kind of built up to where there's a lot of small passive aggression towards Asian Americans. And a lot of times this is kind of looked over because Asians are considered the model minority when it comes to being an American. A lot of the times people look over it because Asians are seen as submissive and seen as obedient because of how they are, whether in the house or in the workplace and things like that. So no one really discusses how Asian Americans are actually being, attacked and how they're being set against with everything going on and with all these small little forms of beliefs that, maybe people have something against Asians or things like that, and they're not really addressing that in the media or in society as much as they are against Blacks or Hispanics because it's never been as abrasive as them. That doesn't mean that it's not something to address though. There's a lot of things going on, like in an article by NextShark where it talks about how the term Chinese virus and all of the microaggressions during the coronavirus outbreak are forms of racism. A lot of times people aren't addressing them because they, again, just are kind of brushing over it, and it's never been something intense that we've ever experienced. But by using the terms like Chinese virus by President Trump or by President Nixon during the Vietnam War, calling Vietnamese people little brown people, it adds this kind of justification that everything that's being said and all the forms of wrongdoings are okay just because, people of power are doing them. And so there's a lot of cases where the attacks against Asian Americans are becoming even more intense and more aggressive. There's a lot more assault cases against Asians with everything going on, especially against elderly Asians in America, and it's an upcoming problem that everyone who is an Asian American or is of Asian descent or even looks of Asian descent is becoming more worried and nervous about, how far is too far. And for us, it's up to us to be able to recognize it and call it out and be aware and knowledgeable of how these things are. Like in ABC's news, they actually made a whole segment on their news about how they need to become more aware and how many cases this is happening and how it's affecting businesses and the economy of Asian communities and things like that. It's all connected, and it's all up to us as individuals to be aware and be knowledgeable and be proactive against this discrimination. And so that's what we have to do as people. We have to be able to look around and realize that even though we present this principle of unity and this idea of, no discrimination and equality, that it still persists. At a shallow level, yes, we are all equal, we are all united, but there are a lot of deep roots of discrimination and of racial hatred and racial injustice and a lot of negative things that are happening based on race or based on sex or based on gender. And so it's up to the common citizens, the everyday people, you and me, to know how these microaggressions might happen. It might be something small like a side comment. It might be someone using a racial slur. Both are forms of racial discrimination, and both have to be acknowledged. And so we have to be able to do that. And the first step is learning, and the second step is being proactive. And so that's what we have to do as people. And I hope that everyone else who watches this or listens to this is able to think twice about what they might say, or